The story of the Moor Cup, brought to you by Active Saver, the medical plan for sportsmen.
That Moor Cup stands for a heck of a lot of things, and that is club rugby. And I'd love to see club rugby come right back to the fore, and our Curry Cup.
Anyone who wants to play rugby, club rugby is the best to play. If you haven't got club rugby, other rugby really doesn't exist, because you've got to have a breeding ground for the players to come through.
Club rugby in this country has always been very, very important, but it has lost its vigour, it's lost its importance.
Looking at a trophy that's 137 years old, you really do realise that there's a hell of a lot of history that's gone into that. There's some great players, there's some great captains that have picked up that trophy, and big wars that have been fought for it.
The Moor Cup has obviously got a rich history. It's been going for 57 years in Natal, and it's the premier competition.
The importance of the Moor Cup leads straight to club rugby, and I'm one that's been very saddened over the years that club rugby has taken a back seat, as it used to be our premier competition, and all our top players played in it.
Playing for something that's historic means a lot more than playing for something that's really worthless, not monetary value, more historic value.
The professional game as we know it today began with club rugby. For many South Africans, this is their way of life. For 37 years I've watched this game, covered this game. I've watched boys go at each other, punish each other week in and week out in these club games. No reward, except maybe the recognition at times of their teammates. Some have gone on to bigger things, but that most certainly is not the story of club rugby. So what is it really for? The hope they might be seen? Or is it something else? Part of our culture, perhaps? Former Natal coach Kus Björkes once said to me, "We can never be bigger than the game." For once we are gone, the game continues with or without us. For me, club rugby is quite simply the heartbeat of the game. I've always known there was something special about the Moor Cup, and when I first heard his story, I knew that this tale had to be told. The oldest rugby trophy in the world, with origins tied to the birth of the game in South Africa. Born on the minefields of Kimberley, the same as the Curry Cup, and went missing for 81 years, only to reappear and make its way to Natal to become the premier club rugby trophy. Having been involved with the club game in all its facets going on 37 years now, I've been privileged to witness the growth of not just the sport as a whole, but our country alongside it. How I got into the industry was almost by chance. Having won a writing competition with the Natal Mercury back in 1977, the then editor approached me to cover second division and under 21 club rugby. And the rest, as they say, is history. When we go back in time, that is probably one of the most beautiful trophies. I still have the Mercury Wednesday column and am now the club's editor for the Sharks magazine, as well as a media liaison officer for the SA Rugby Legends. Having had the support from two great icons of the game during my early years in reporting, Doc Swaden and Skonk Nicholson, I had discussed the idea of doing this documentary a decade or so ago. Having sat with Skonk and listened to his amazing stories of club rugby in the early years of the game, it made me realise that it was the club game that actually paved the way for provincial and international rugby, and indeed the now famous Springbok jersey. So to find out more, I decided to contact two of the country's top rugby historians, Hugh Bladen and Dan Retief, and see if they would join me on a trip to the home of the Cup to unearth its origins. A trip that would take me to all corners of our amazing country, and with that, revealing the roots of the game itself. The story of the Moor Cup goes deeper than just its own roots. It's inextricably linked to the emergence of the game of rugby in South Africa as a whole. Although the debate of the exact date and place of the first game of rugby rages on, one thing is known: the game of rugby football in its earliest form was introduced by English colonial in the early 1860s. Used at the Cape schools as a tool to harness the energy of young men, it was also used in the diamond fields of Kimberley to diffuse and distract from the hardships of a life on the mine. In the Cape colonies, a type of football was being played at the Bishop School in Rondebosch. It was a local variation of the Winchester game introduced by the principal of Bishop's, George Ogilvie, whose nickname was Gog. The game was referred to as the Winchester game or Gog's ball. During the same time that the game was being introduced to Kimberley in the 1870s, then a thriving hub, the exact same thing taking place in the Western Cape was also happening in the colony of Natal. The first leg of our journey, we visit Maritzburg College, celebrating its 150th anniversary. Matthew Marwick, archive custodian for the school, was able to share some very interesting facts about Skonk Nicholson and the first recorded game in KwaZulu-Natal. But just who was Skonk Nicholson? When people say a person was a legend in his own lifetime, it's sometimes an exaggeration. But in relation to one Skonk Nicholson, it is appropriate and true. He was extremely invested in nurturing the game at grassroots level, and it was as a uniquely successful school rugby coach that he is most widely recognised and remembered. His knowledge of the game was such that during his 35 years in charge of Maritzburg College Rugby, the school became known, as one sports writer has said, a vibrant nursery for South African rugby. His extraordinary success as a rugby coach is shown by a large number of his Maritzburg College first 15 players who over the years went on to represent their province and indeed their country.
Skunk Nicholson, besides being a great coach of rugby, was also a great scholar of the game. He had a number of books which he used to read religiously, and he came up with the theory that possibly the match played against Hermannsburg in 1870 was the first rugby game played in South Africa, well, certainly the first recorded one. And the reason why he says this, and I've looked into it a bit myself, is that certainly football had been played in South Africa from the 1850s, but there were so many different types of football. There was Winchester rules, there was association football, which we call soccer, there was Gog's game being played down in Bishops. But if you look in the history books, Bishops only really played rugby itself, not Gog's game, but rugby, from about 1880 onwards. And the old Cape clubs like Villages and Hamiltons were only founded in 1875. So if we go back to this report in 1870 that featured in the Natal Witness, there's a strong argument to say that because it was a 15-man game played very much in accordance with the rules of rugby, not any other form of football, but rugby itself, that this was quite possibly the first game played and recorded in South African rugby history.
The first recorded rugby match in the colony of Natal took place in 1870 between Hermannsburg School and the City High School, later to become Maritzburg College. The match took place on the Market Square in Maritzburg. The match was recorded in the then Natal Witness and ended with a scoreline of 2-0 to Maritzburg College. I wasn't there to play that game, but I have it on good authority that the City High School boys won by 2-0. The witness does mention a disputed try in which a spectator touched the ball. So I think if it wasn't for that, maybe the Hermannsburg chaps would have won that, although the college chaps say that would have made their victory more complete.
Of course, this whole debate about who played rugby first and what game was played first is a very contentious one and has been so, I think, for a number of decades. We at Maritzburg College, and specifically Skunk, tried to settle the factual basis for this game by consulting none other than Doc Craven, who was, besides being a great player and administrator, was himself a great historian of the game. And he replied to Skunk's inquiries, I think in about 1970, at the time of the centenary of that match, to say unequivocally that it was not just a football game, of course, but it was a rugby game played very much in lines with the rules of rugby school itself.
Upon further investigation, we note that the names of two Maritzburg College Old Boys, Thomas Jem and Henry Norse, appear on the Moor Cup trophy as part of the winning team in 1875, showing a strong link between the first recorded game and the emergence of the game in the diamond fields.
It's interesting seeing the name of Henry Norse on this cup, which was played for in 1875 and then donated to the old colony of Natal in 1876, because the name of Henry Norse appears on it as one of the victors in that first match ever played. And Henry Norse had been born in 1857 and he came to school here at the old Peter Maritzburg High School, leaving at the age of 13 to go and find his fortune in Kimberley, and that he did. He ended up being a landlord, the founder of Norse Mines, the first president of the South African Olympic Committee, and also he became the owner of the largest stud farm in the world, allegedly. So it links back to Peter Maritzburg High School, Maritzburg College, and of course Skunk Nicholson, who was such a devout supporter of the history of the school.
Leaving Maritzburg, I found myself realizing the importance of the Moor Cup and its place in rugby history. But to understand its importance, we need to trace where its origins lie. It's a story spanning 140 years, and the origins of the Cup are quite fascinating. Investigating the hallmarks of the trophy itself, we discovered the trophy was manufactured in Birmingham by a certain George Unite in 1873, this making it the oldest trophy in world rugby. The Cup would find its way to Kimberley 2 years later to be presented for a game to be played between the Colonials and the home-born players. The Colonials won the game, and so the trophy was presented to the winning team. It was decided that the silverware should be raffled amongst the players of the winning side. George Moor, the man the famous trophy is named after, won the raffle, and so the Moor Cup was born. George Moor's trophy was left in Kimberley to be contested